Hello, Primals. Today I want to talk about waking up, walking away, and letting go. And yes, in that order. Now, the reason that I want to talk about this is because I've had a few requests recently talking more about just my own spiritual journey and how we can all kind of come together and influence people in a healthy, positive way that improves the livelihood emotionally, physically, and spiritually for each of us. Now, I also want to encourage people to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and also share the video if you find this useful or informative. So, when I first started waking up, I say that with quotation marks here for the people listening. I say that because waking up to me was something that just kind of happened. I always knew that there was something more that I was wanting to experience in the world, and I always felt like I had been here before. I don't exactly quite understand how to explain it other than that. It was just this feeling of being on Earth before. And I don't necessarily believe in past lives per se, but I will say that I've had many meditations and revelations where it was revealed to me that, yes, my eyelids will see shadows of sorrow on this journey of awakening. And that being said, the awakening process revealed to me that not everybody's going to go where you're going to go. And realizing that is painful in itself, because you realize that some people really don't want what you want, which is okay, but you don't really realize the gravity of it until you're there, right? Like, with one of the people in my family that I really cared about prior to awakening, I had thought would always be there. And, I don't want to dishonor my family at all. However, I do want to make it clear that sometimes the sense of superiority and the insistence thereof will absolutely inhibit and infringe upon any relationship with me in general. I do not like superiority. I do not like authority figures that are tyrants per se. And that was really one of the biggest triggers of my awakening, actually, and realizing that the shadow is a big part of incorporating the personality. Now, for those of you that do not know, you may know the term shadow work, but the shadow is essentially all of the things that you don't like about yourself or you don't like about others that are needed to incorporate to help you grow an understanding of your own darkness. So the shadow, there's in Jungian Psychology, there are four main components to the personality. There's the ego, the shadow, the anima or animus, and then there's the self. So the ego is obviously what your consciousness believes who you are to be. And a lot of that is unconscious programming, but it's kind of like the Sigmund Freud metaphor with the iceberg, right? A lot of your personality is submerged underwater, so to speak. And there's only a finite, there's a lot of things at face value within the ego. And there's aspects of the ego, but within the ego itself, like the persona and such, but we'll keep it as these four primary personality traits for the time being and for the purpose of this video. The shadow is the second layer of your personality. And that is for, like, if you see in dreams, for example, if you have nightmares of the same sex that is like attacking you, or you're trying to attack it, likely that is your shadow projection in the dream. And there's something that is trying to be told to you in that dream about your shadow that you either need to incorporate or look at. Now, there's a book by Carl Jung that talks a lot about, it's called Aion. And in Aion, it's about the phenomenology of the self. He says in there that the shadow is something that many people can at least have the courage to look at. But the anima or animus are very, very different. It's completely different altogether, because the anima is, for men, the totality, and this is the third layer. For men, the anima is the totality of feminine experiences within their psyche. So it is an internal expression of their external experiences with women. And with the animus, it is the female version of masculine experiences externally reflected internally. So the animus and the anima are both, I believe, are Latin oriented, and the purpose is just to distinguish the masculine and the feminine aspects. So again, this is the third layer. So the first is the ego, then the shadow, and then the anima and animus, and then there's the self at the very bottom, which is the last and fourth layer of the personality. And the self is the totality of all at once together. And in Aion, Jung's book Aion, it talks a lot about about Jesus being the foundation of the self to some degree or another. Now, there's a lot that we can go into to talk about that. However, for today's purposes, again, I'm going to stick with these four principles of the personality. Now, when I first encountered my shadow, really, really sincerely for the first time, it was about 4.5 years ago or so. And it was after my first psychedelic trip, and I had several traumatic dreams. Like, they were very frightening. And the reason that they were so frightening was because the fabric of my reality was being washed away, and the filthiness of my reality was being washed away, and the light was being shown on my shadow, so to speak. And it was very distraught. It was very painful to look at, because, well, when you wake up, you realize how much you kept yourself in the dark, and you realize that there's a lot of people in the dark that do not know that they're in the dark, and you're one of them. Whoa, that was wild to me. That was wild to me at the time. And now it's like, I'm just getting to the point to where well, here's the other thing about the four personality traits. They are archetypal. So these are things that are always going to be permanent in your personality. And Carl Jung himself, the psychologist that wrote all these books about personality and shadow and animus, he says that the shadow reaches all the way to hell. That is, I think he quite means that literally and figuratively, as well as psychologically, that your capacity for evil doing and your capacity for wickedness is just as much so as the next person. And boy, oh boy, that was frightening to me as well, because I realized that I was dangerous. And that was my first encounter with the shadow. My first encounter with the animus, my anima. The anima, I could only describe her as a blue woman And I was on an LSD trip, and this was about 3.5 years ago. And I was by myself, and I was in my room, and I had a tapestry of the galaxy, and in the galaxy started to form, like it started to move, and I started to see this blue woman in the galaxy. And the blue woman on the tapestry started to communicate with me, not verbally, but emotionally and spiritually. It was a very spiritual thing. And I understand some people watching this are like, wow, he was high as hell. Like, no, it's funny because, like, reflecting on it, I felt very sober, which was very strange. That's the weird thing about psychedelics, is that they almost, like, sometimes they almost make you feel more sane in that insanity, at least that perceived insanity. So anyway, with the blue woman, what she was communicating with me was that she wants to care for me, but I'm not letting her. And I didn't understand what that meant for quite a while, but obviously it has to go back with my relationship with my mother and a lot of different things there that, I wasn't necessarily the best kid in the world, but I wasn't necessarily the worst kid in the world either. And my mom did everything that she could. I don't want to dishonor my family, but my parents were dealing with things on their own as well. And so this experience with the blue woman was a very truthful experience for me, because it was as if my internal woman was telling me that it's okay to be creative, and it's okay to care, and it's okay to be in touch with your emotions, which I had always been a very emotional person, but it wasn't until I started to really, how would you say, like, really express those emotions properly and control the emotions and just observing them rather than letting them control me, was really when I started to understand what the internal woman was. And for women, I think this is very applicable to your Animus. So reason being is because now, like, if you, well, before I get into that, Carl Jung also talks about being anima or animus possessed. Now, my theory is that, and I don't quite have this completely written out, but my theory is that a lot of narcissists are actually animus or anima possessed. They let their inner woman or inner man control them, so much so that they are completely under the guise of these personality traits that are completely unconscious to them. And Carl Jung talks about in Aion, he says that it's one thing for a person to have courage to stand up to the shadow, but to confront the anima or animus can be very, very, I don't exactly remember the word that he used, but he says something like, staring at the anima or animus can cause death to the eyes, or something like that. And the point is that there are few people in the world that can look their anima or animus internally and accept it wholeheartedly, because it is such a frightening experience. Now, I also think that this is where a lot of the, like, gender confusion comes from initially, which is very interesting, because this was one of the things that led me away from being a well, let's say one of the letter people. I was never associated with them, but I never associated myself. I was always considered myself a heterosexual male, but I was very accepting of these kinds of people, and I still am to very much, very large degree. But I I don't think it's right, um, for a lot of different reasons that I can go into in another video. But the point is that I walked away from it and I felt much better. I felt more pure. I felt more true. I felt more awake, right? I just felt more, I was seeing things clearly for the first time in a long time. And so these confrontations with my shadow and my anima led me to the self. And my first encounter with the self, I would say, was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, was when I was completely immersed in the selfless consciousness of reality. And I did not have any psychedelics in order to have this experience. It was just a happening. It was very pure. I was completely sober and have been for quite some time now because of these experiences. And it occurred to me that some of the most challenging things in waking up is learning how to let go. Because whatever you fear to lose is trying to teach you how to let go of something, right? And so I had a lot of things that I feared to lose. I feared a lot of the potential friends that I wouldn't have. I feared a lot of missing out on opportunities. I feared that I wasn't given the proper tools to live a life in accordance to the highest possible standards that I could set for myself. And I was worried that, like the list goes on and on, right? Like we all have worries, but it wasn't until these moments of encountering the self, which was this complete transcendental experience, this mystical experience that I don't think I would have been able to have without psychedelics to some degree. But I also think that anybody could have that experience without psychedelics. And so I don't exactly know what it was that I did, because it was just very natural. It was very natural just what happened. And the profundity of the experience was so impactful that it completely reshaped how I operate in the world. It encouraged me to stay healthy again, like get more healthy and exercise and eat well and just let go of friends that don't actually want what is best for me. And because genuine desire in relationships, whether it's a friend or partner or significant other, whatever you want to call it, I don't like the word partner, but anyway, that's a whole different story. The point is that genuine desire in relationships doesn't lie. And I've noticed that a lot of the people that I chose to have relationships with were because I was afraid of being alone, not because I wanted to be with these people. And it's funny because now, as I get older, I realize that very few people in this world don't bore me. And that's not to say that I don't love people, because I do love people and I want what's best for everybody. I want people to prosper. But realizing how alone you really are in the world, that encounter with the self, and helping me understand these layers of my own personality really helped me understand that I really am alone in this world to some degree. But that doesn't mean I need to be lonely. And it is better to have something to offer into the world after going through these experiences. than to wither and waste away what you could have been, because you all have a fire in you. You all have you all have that light, that burning desire to achieve or to do something. I'm not saying you have to have that to be awake, but oddly enough, you do have to have that in order to let go. So these are the stages of awakening, walking away, and letting go. I had to wake up to what I needed to walk away from so that I could let go and live a life more in the light. So with that being said, I hope this message was useful, and I hope you all have a blessed, peaceful day. Till next time.